They called it the wedding of the year. Every blog, TV station, and gossip page was buzzing. Billionaire businessman David Okoro was getting married, and not just to anyone. His bride-to-be, Olivia Roberts, was from one of Nigeria's most powerful and influential families. She was beautiful, rich, and walked like the world owed her something. The type of woman people admired from afar but were scared to approach. David's mansion in Lagos was full of activity. Designers came in and out with fabric samples, chefs were testing out wedding menus, and decorators were transforming the garden into a fairy tale space. Everything had to be perfect, not just for Olivia, but for the entire country watching. David himself was a man people respected, not loud or flashy, but known for his calm presence and sharp business mind. He had built his empire from the ground up, and now, at 38, he was finally settling down. At least, that's what people thought. Inside the house, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. The staff were tense. They tiptoed around Olivia like they were walking on broken glass. One wrong move, and she would snap. "Maria," Olivia's voice rang out sharply one morning. "How many times have I told you not to fold my dresses like this?" Maria looked up from the bed she was making. She was in her early 20s, quiet, always polite. The kind of girl who did her work without complaint. She blinked, unsure what she had done wrong this time. "I'm sorry, Ma," she said softly. "Don't apologize. Just use your brain for once," Olivia hissed, tossing the dress at her like it was garbage. Then she stormed out, heels clicking against the marble floor. Maria swallowed hard and picked up the dress. She said nothing. She never did. What Olivia didn't know was that Maria was working double shifts just to pay for her mother's hospital bills. Every naira she earned went into keeping her mother alive. She didn't have the energy to fight back. She just wanted to survive. David had seen Olivia scold staff before, but he assumed it was just stress. After all, planning a wedding that big wasn't easy. He didn't know how often it happened, or how cruel she really was. To him, Olivia was elegant, intelligent, and knew how to hold her own in any crowd. Their relationship wasn't built on deep love, but it looked good on paper. The power, the image, the headlines. It all fit perfectly. "Olivia and I are a strong team," David had once said during a business dinner. "We understand each other." But the truth, David barely knew her. He didn't know how she treated people beneath her. He didn't know that she often laughed behind his back with her friends, mocking how serious he was. And he definitely didn't know that deep down, Olivia didn't love him. She loved the idea of being the wife of Nigeria's most respected billionaire. The only person who seemed to see it clearly was Maria, but she kept her head down. She knew her place. Still, sometimes when David passed by and greeted the staff, he'd pause for a second when he saw Maria. There was something different about her eyes maybe. They were tired but kind, sad but strong. "Good morning, Maria," he said once, offering a small smile. Maria bowed her head. "Good morning, sir. Sus." Their exchange lasted barely 3 seconds, but something in the way she looked at him, like she saw him, not the billionaire, just the man, lingered in his mind longer than he expected. As the wedding day drew closer, the mansion buzzed with more excitement, but also more tension. And while David rehearsed his vows, planned the guest list, and smiled for the cameras, he had no idea that the woman he was about to marry would soon reveal a side of herself that would shake everything he thought he knew. Even more surprising? The quiet maid folding clothes in the background, the one nobody noticed, was about to change his life forever. Maria lived 2 lives. By day, she worked inside the Okoro mansion, cleaning rooms, scrubbing marble floors, ironing designer clothes, and keeping quiet no matter what insults were thrown her way. But by night, when her shift ended and most of the city slept, She took long, bumpy bus rides to a public hospital on the mainland to sit by her mother's bedside. Her mother, Mama Grace, had late-stage kidney failure. The doctors said she needed a transplant or at least steady dialysis. But those things cost money Maria didn't have. So she did what she could. She wiped her mother's forehead with cool towels, spoon-fed her watery soup, and prayed. That was all she could afford. Hard work, love, and prayer. Maria was only 26, but life had aged her heart. Her hands were always rough from cleaning agents. Her eyes, though still gentle, held a permanent tiredness. She had no friends, no boyfriend, no one to lean on, just her mother. And she had to stay strong, for both of them. At the mansion, Olivia never made it easy. "Maria," she snapped one afternoon, "did you use the cheap fabric softener again? My sheets smell like soap from the market." "No, Ma," Maria said quietly, not lifting her eyes. "I used the usual one." "Don't argue with me. You people always want to cut corners. I don't know why we even keep you here." Maria bowed slightly. "Sorry, Ma." Olivia scoffed and stormed off, tossing a silk pillow across the hallway. Maria bent to pick it up, her fingers shaking slightly. But she didn't cry. She had long run out of tears. David happened to walk past just then. He noticed Olivia's angry footsteps, and then saw Maria quietly gathering the pillow. Everything all right?" he asked, pausing. Maria looked up, startled. "Yes, sir." He studied her face for a second. She didn't look angry. She didn't even look annoyed. Just calm, like someone who had learned to survive storms. "You're Maria, right?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, sir." He looked down at the pillow in her hand. "That's Olivia's favorite. She's very particular." Maria gave a faint smile. "Yes, sir, I'll clean it again. Maybe add more of the softener." David raised an eyebrow. "You didn't do anything wrong, did you?" Maria hesitated. Then she shook her head slowly. "No, sir, but it's okay. She's under stress. The wedding's close." David smiled faintly. That answer surprised him. Not just the words, but the grace in them. He'd seen staff defend themselves before, even lie to cover their tracks. But this girl didn't even try to shift blame. She simply chose peace. "You've worked here long?" he asked. "Almost 2 years, sir." He nodded again. "All right, carry on." And just like that, he walked away. To David, it was a quick, casual chat. But to Maria, that small conversation lingered in her chest like a warm ember. Not because it meant anything romantic. No, not at all. But because for the first time in a very long while, someone had looked at her and spoken like she was human. Peanuts. Later that evening, Maria sat by her mother's hospital bed, gently rubbing her legs. "How was work?" Mama Grace asked, her voice weak but curious. Maria smiled faintly. "Busy, as usual." Madame Olivia shouted at me again. That one. Her wahala is plenty," her mother whispered with a tired grin. Maria chuckled softly. "But Mr. David spoke to me today." "Ian? What did he say?" "Nothing much. Just asked if I was okay." Her mother looked at her and held her hand gently. "My child, even small kindness can carry a person far." Maria nodded. She didn't know why, but those words stayed with her all night. Because deep down, something was shifting. A door was opening, slowly, quietly, in both their lives. It was a Friday evening. The sky outside was already growing dark, the wind carrying that heavy, sticky feeling Lagos sometimes had before rain. Inside the mansion, most of the staff had already clocked out or were finishing their last tasks. Maria was still on the top floor, collecting laundry Olivia had thrown around during another one of her tantrums. David, on the other hand, had just finished a tense Zoom meeting with international investors. He wasn't in the best mood. His head was pounding, and all he wanted was a few moments of quiet. Ans. He stepped into the service elevator, the one usually used by staff, wanting to avoid the crowd and noise in the main part of the house. Maria entered from another floor, clutching a laundry basket tightly to her chest. She gasped a little when she saw him. "Sir, sorry, I didn't know." "It's fine," David said, rubbing his temple. "Go ahead." The doors closed. The elevator hummed quietly as it began to descend, but suddenly, halfway down, everything stopped. The lights flickered and went out completely. Then silence. "What the?" David muttered. Maria's grip on the basket tightened. Oh no. The elevator didn't move. No air was coming through the vents, no backup lights, just stillness and darkness. Power outage. Of course, the generator hadn't kicked in yet. Olivia had been delaying repairs to the backup system, claiming it was not urgent. David pulled out his phone. No signal. Maria pulled hers too, but it was dead. He sighed. Just great. Maria stood still, trying to stay calm. Her breath was shaky, but she didn't say a word. After a few minutes of silence, David leaned against the wall. This is ridiculous," he said, more to himself. "I'm sorry, sir," Maria said softly. David turned to her. "Why are you apologizing? You didn't cause this." Maria gave a small nod but said nothing else. The silence stretched again. Then, quietly, almost in a whisper, David asked, "Are you okay?" Maria blinked in surprise. "Me?" "Yes, you. You look tired." Maria hesitated. She had never talked to him like this before. Never expected to. I'm fine, sir," she replied. David narrowed his eyes slightly. "You sure? You look like someone who hasn't slept properly in days." Maria pressed her lips together, trying to stay composed. But something about being stuck, unable to run or hide, made her chest tighten. My mother is sick," she finally said, voice low. "Very sick." David's expression changed. He said nothing, just waited. "She's at Ikeja General," Maria continued, her voice trembling. "Kidney failure. She needs treatment I can't afford. I work here during the day and clean offices at night, but it's still not enough." The elevator remained quiet, only the soft hum of electricity trying to return in the distance. "I've thought about begging," Maria said, almost ashamed. Or worse. But I can't. I can't bring myself to take shortcuts. My mother raised me better than that. She laughed bitterly. "Sometimes I wonder if being good even helps anyone." David was still. His throat tightened at her words. "I see people who lie, cheat, and step on others getting everything. And me? I clean floors, carry dirty laundry, and still watch the only person I love slowly fade away." A tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't even bother to wipe it. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to talk too much." "No," David said gently. "Don't apologize. Please, keep going." Maria looked up at him, surprised. David shook his head. "It's been a long time since someone spoke to me like this, with no filter, no angle." He moved closer, not too close, just enough that she could hear him clearly. "I sit in rooms where people pretend to laugh at my jokes. I sign checks and make speeches, and everyone claps even when I don't mean a word I say. But you're the first person who's just been real." Maria lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. David looked at her, really looked, and for the first time he didn't see a maid. He saw a daughter, a fighter, someone carrying a weight that most people would never survive. And in that tiny elevator, something shifted, quietly, unexpectedly. No love, not yet, but respect, and that was the beginning. After that night in the elevator, something shifted in David. He didn't talk about it. He didn't even admit it to himself. But Maria's words stayed with him. Her voice, calm but heavy with pain, kept echoing in his mind. It had been a long time since someone had opened up to him like that. No pretending, no faking smiles, just honesty, raw and unfiltered. So the next morning, when Olivia burst into the room with a new list of demands for the wedding planner, David found himself watching her more closely. Not just her words, but the way she treated people. The way she moved like the whole world existed to serve her. "We need to reshoot the pre-wedding photos," Olivia said sharply, flipping through pictures on her tablet. "This one makes my jaw look wide, and the lighting is bad." David looked at the photo. She looked flawless. Everyone thought so. But Olivia wasn't really looking at the pictures. She was looking for perfection and control. "Olivia," he said quietly, "you don't think maybe we're overdoing it?" She froze, then slowly turned to him. "Excuse me?" "I mean, the wedding. All the press, the interviews, the articles. We've spent more time posing for magazines than talking to each other." Olivia blinked. Then she laughed, a short, cold laugh. "David, this wedding isn't just about us. It's about your name, your image, our image. Do you know how many women would kill to be in my position? Let's not ruin it with all this sentiment." He stared at her for a moment, then simply nodded. "Right." But inside, a crack had formed. Small, but real. Later that day, David stepped out onto the upstairs hallway just as Olivia's voice pierced through the silence like a whip. "You touched it? Are you mad?" He stopped. Below him, at the bottom of the grand staircase, Maria stood frozen, holding a sparkling white dress in her hands. "I was just helping the wardrobe lady," Maria stammered. "She asked me to bring it to the dressing room." "Do you know how much that dress costs? It's a designer piece. Your sweaty hands have no business touching something like this." Maria lowered her head, clearly shaken. David's jaw clenched. Olivia yanked the dress from Maria's hands and turned around, only to find David watching from the top of the stairs. Their eyes locked. For a split second, Olivia looked caught, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "Oh, baby," she said sweetly. "This girl nearly ruined the dress. Can you imagine?" David didn't smile back. "I asked Maria to assist with logistics," he lied, "to help the staff stay on schedule. She was doing her job." Maria looked up, surprised. Olivia blinked. "Oh, I didn't know that." "You never ask," David replied quietly. There was a pause, one of those moments where everything is still but heavy. David walked down the stairs and gently nodded at Maria. "You're fine. Carry on." She gave a small bow, barely meeting his eyes, and slipped away quietly. Olivia tried to change the subject, laughing nervously, but David wasn't listening anymore. That night, he found himself scrolling through his phone. Not business news, not wedding updates, just staring at the picture one of the staff had taken of the team during a charity event. Maria was in the background, barely visible, holding a crate of supplies. She wasn't smiling for the camera. She was carrying something twice her size, trying to keep the box balanced, her face half hidden in the shadows. There. But even in that tiny blur of a photo, she looked real, present, alive. And for the first time since he proposed to Olivia, David found himself wondering, was he marrying the wrong woman? By now, David's mind was no longer resting. Days had passed since that moment on the staircase, but the image of Olivia yelling at Maria kept flashing in his head. The way Maria quietly stood there, taking it, not because she was weak, but because she had no choice. And the way Olivia had smiled like nothing happened when she saw him watching. That smile no longer looked charming. It looked calculated. Still, David tried to convince himself that things would smooth out after the wedding. That was until Olivia's father invited him to lunch. They met at a private golf club. One of those places where power was passed through handshakes and silent agreements. Chief Roberts, Olivia's father, was a man of wealth and influence. He dressed like someone who didn't need to speak loudly to be heard. "David, my boy," he said, raising a glass of expensive palm wine. "You're making the right decision. Olivia will make you a fine wife." David nodded politely. "Yes, sir." They ate, they laughed, they talked politics and business. Everything seemed normal, until the conversation took a sharp turn. There's just one little thing I'd like us to settle before the wedding," Chief Roberts said casually, sliding a slim folder across the table. "Nothing too serious, just a small prenup agreement." David raised an eyebrow as he opened the folder. His eyes scanned the document, and then paused. It wasn't just a typical prenup. The agreement included a clause giving Olivia's family a percentage of shares in one of David's most successful companies, if the marriage lasted beyond 3 years. "Forgive me, Chief," David said slowly, "but I wasn't aware this marriage came with a business partnership." The older man chuckled. "It's just formality, my boy. We're merging powerful families. It only makes sense to build a legacy together." David leaned back, the air suddenly heavier around him. "I'll think about it," he said simply. But the truth was already unraveling in his mind. Love wasn't supposed to feel like a transaction, not with clauses and conditions and hidden motives. And now he couldn't ignore the growing feeling in his chest. Was Olivia marrying him? Or his money? Back at the mansion that evening, Maria was folding napkins for a dinner party when Olivia walked in, heels clacking against the tiles like gunshots. "You think I don't see what you're doing?" she said coldly. Maria looked up confused. "Ma?" "Oh, please, don't play dumb. I've noticed the way you linger around David, always looking so innocent. Is that your plan? To use those poor girl tears to climb into his bed?" Maria's face turned pale. "No, Ma, I would never—" "Save it," Olivia snapped. "You were nothing when you came here, and when this wedding is over, I'll make sure you're thrown out so fast you won't even have time to beg." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes, but she held her ground. "I have never disrespected you, Ma, or him. I only do my work." Olivia stepped closer, eyes blazing. "Stay away from my fiancé, you pathetic little maid." Maria stood there, frozen, ashamed, and humiliated. She didn't wait for more. She dropped the napkins, picked up her bag, and walked straight to her small quarters at the back of the estate. That night, she packed her things. She couldn't take it anymore. The insults, the constant fear, the pressure. It wasn't worth it. She would find another job, somewhere else. Anywhere else. But before she could leave, a knock came on the door. It was David. He stood there in the hallway, holding something in his hand. Maria quickly wiped her face and tried to hide her bag. "Maria," he said softly, "you're leaving?" She hesitated. "Yes, sir, I think it's best." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Did Olivia say something to you?" Maria lowered her eyes. "It doesn't matter." "It does," David said gently. "I want to know." Maria stayed quiet for a moment, then whispered, "She thinks I'm trying to steal you." David let out a breath, half in disbelief, half in sadness. "She doesn't even see you," he said. "Not really, but I do." Maria looked up, surprised. "Sir?" "You don't have to go," David continued, "unless you want to. But if you stay, I promise you, things will change." And for the first time, Maria saw it in his eyes. Not just sympathy, not just guilt, but something else. Something real. Saturday morning came quietly, the kind of day that hung heavy in the air like it knew something was about to change. Maria stood at the mansion's gate, dressed in a plain blouse and long skirt. She had taken the day off for the first time in months. There was no makeup on her face, no jewelry, Just a small nylon handbag clutched to her chest and a folded brown envelope hidden inside, with the little money she'd managed to save over the past weeks. David noticed her leaving. He watched from the balcony, just quietly observing. Something about the way she walked, with urgency, with purpose, stirred a curiosity he couldn't explain. Into? On impulse, he followed her. Oh, not in his usual sleek black car, but in a nondescript vehicle with tinted windows. He kept a distance, not wanting her to see. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Maybe he just wanted to understand the kind of life Maria lived outside the walls of his mansion. Her bus ride took over an hour, past busy junctions, crowded markets, and run-down neighborhoods. Eventually, she arrived at a faded government hospital. The building looked tired, its walls stained with age, its windows cracked and dusty. David parked across the road and watched as Maria entered. He waited 10 minutes. Then, curious and cautious, he walked in too, staying behind corners and open doorways where she wouldn't notice. Maria made her way down the hallway and entered a room with peeling green paint and a broken ceiling fan. On the bed lay an elderly woman, frail, pale, and struggling to breathe. "Mama," Maria whispered, sitting at her bedside. Her mother smiled faintly, her eyes lighting up. "My child, you came." "I brought your medicine," Maria said, pulling out a tiny paper bag with a label from the pharmacy. "I used the last I had, but I'll find more. I promise." David watched from the hallway, hidden from view. He saw how Maria leaned over to wipe her mother's forehead, how she adjusted her pillow, how she kissed her hand and whispered softly in her ear. There was no glamour here, no cameras, no fancy restaurants or social media moments, just love. Simple, selfless love. A doctor came in with a clipboard. Maria stood and followed him outside the room. "Doctor," she said gently, "please tell me the truth. How is she?" The man looked at her with tired eyes. "She's getting weaker by the day. The dialysis isn't enough anymore. Without a transplant or more intensive care, she doesn't have long." Maria's lips trembled. "How long?" "Maybe weeks, maybe less." She nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears. "Thank you." The doctor added, "If there's a way to move her to a private facility, she might be more comfortable. But I understand money is tight." Maria smiled through her tears. "I'll find a way. I always do." David stood frozen around the corner. Something in his chest cracked open. He thought of Olivia's endless shopping sprees, the designer gowns, the wedding rings she insisted weren't sparkly enough. And then he looked at Maria, holding her mother's fragile hand with the tenderness of someone who had nothing, but gave everything. He left the hospital quietly, without saying a word, but before he drove off, he made one stop at the front desk. He didn't leave his name, just a quiet instruction to settle all of Madame Grace's outstanding bills and prepay for the next 3 months of care, including an upgrade to a better room and daily medication. Then he drove away, heart full of thoughts he couldn't yet put into words. Back in the hospital room, Maria returned to her mother's side. She took her hand and said, "Mama, I'll fight for you, even if I have to clean the whole world." Her mother smiled weakly. "I don't need the world. I just need you." Meanwhile, far away in his mansion, David sat alone in his study, staring out the window. The wedding plans were still in motion. But deep inside, he already knew he was engaged to the wrong woman. And the one who truly touched his heart didn't even know she had. David had always trusted his instincts. In business, he could sense a lie before the words left someone's mouth. But when it came to love, real love, he had been blind, or maybe just too hopeful. After seeing Maria at the hospital, something inside him shifted for good. But still, he hadn't taken any action. Not yet. Not until the truth slapped him right in the face. It happened one quiet afternoon. David returned home earlier than usual. The house was calm. Most of the staff were busy outside preparing for the upcoming wedding press shoot. Olivia was inside, supposedly picking out jewelry with her stylist. He walked down the hallway, heading toward his study, when he heard laughter echo from the guest lounge. It was Olivia's voice, loud, amused, and full of mockery. Curious? He paused. "No, I swear, Tanya," Olivia said through the phone, laughing. "This man is completely clueless. You should have seen him trying to act all deep and serious the other day." David froze. She kept going. "All it took was a few tears and a fake. I believe in your dream speech. Boom, engaged to a billionaire, please. I mean, even that Maid girl is starting to act bold now. I caught her talking to him like they were equals." There was a pause. Olivia scoffed. "Let her try. He's too smart to fall for her little village sob stories." David's heart sank. Another voice came through, her friend Tanya on speaker. "You're wicked, babe." "I'm honest," Olivia replied, still laughing. "He's a business deal with legs. Once the ring is on and the press tour is done, we'll lock down those shares. His company is our retirement plan." David didn't move. He didn't barge in. He didn't scream or confront her. He just stood there, hearing the truth he had been too afraid to admit to himself. Everything Olivia said, every word, stabbed deeper than the last, not just because she had lied, but because he had ignored the signs. He walked away quietly. By evening, a plan was already in motion. David met privately with his legal team. "Cancel the wedding," he said calmly, quietly, no press statement yet, "and draft a false prenup for Olivia to sign, something harmless. I want her to think it's still happening." His assistant blinked. "Sir, are you sure?" David nodded. "One more thing. Get me a cheap, fake diamond ring. She wants the world to see it. Let her wear glass." Over the next few days, the mansion remained a flurry of wedding activity. Olivia was glowing, posing for photos, gushing on social media, and showing off her custom engagement ring to anyone who would listen. But David, he was distant, calm, almost too calm. He didn't argue, didn't ask questions, he just watched. When Olivia bragged to a stylist that she had the entire staff dancing to her tune, David quietly removed her name from the wedding guest clearance list. Us. When she made a rude comment about Maria again, this time calling her a charity case in uniform, David simply walked out of the room. But deep inside, his mind was made up. He was done pretending. Behind the scenes, the wedding venue was canceled. The caterers were called off. Invitations were withdrawn. Only a few trusted staff members knew the truth. To the outside world, everything still looked perfect. But to David, it was already over. The next time Olivia brought out her phone for another engagement video, David stood beside her and smiled politely. When she showed off her fake diamond ring, he didn't correct her. "Yeah, let the cameras roll," he thought. "Let her enjoy the fantasy she built." Because soon, the curtain would fall, and the world would see who really stood by his side. And it wouldn't be Olivia. The day finally arrived. The grand lawn of the Okoro estate was transformed into something out of a royal movie. White roses lined the aisle. Golden chairs shimmered under the soft Lago sun. A glass stage stood ready for vows that would never be spoken. Guests began to arrive. Politicians, celebrities, CEOs, influencers, all dressed in their finest lace and agbada. Camera crews were everywhere. Drones hovered above, capturing every angle. Social media was on fire. #Olivia and David was trending in 3 countries. But David Okoro was nowhere to be seen. Still, no one panicked. Not at first. Everyone assumed the groom was simply keeping tradition. Maybe he was taking his time. Maybe he wanted a dramatic entrance. But something felt off. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Olivia stood in front of a tall mirror. Her dress sparkled with hand-stitched crystals. Her makeup was perfect. Her smile, fake but flawless. Today, she whispered to herself, admiring her reflection, the world will know who I am. She adjusted her ring and walked confidently to the back garden, ready to make her grand entrance. Music began to play. Phones went up. The announcer spoke. Everyone, please rise for the bride. Olivia stepped onto the aisle, all eyes on her. She walked slowly, soaking in the admiration, the whispers of praise, the flashing cameras. This was her moment. But as she neared the altar, something odd happened. There was no one there. No groom, no pastor, just silence. People began to murmur. Is this part of the show? Maybe David's doing a surprise entrance. Wait, did she come out too early? But as the seconds passed, the whispers turned to confusion, then doubt, and then panic. Olivia's smile twitched. She looked around. Where is he? She whispered to her bridesmaid. I don't know, the girl stammered. One of the ushers rushed forward with a phone in hand. Ma, we can't reach Mr. David. He's not answering calls. A cold wave washed over Olivia's face. Then someone in the crowd muttered, I saw a girl leaving the compound earlier. Looked like one of the housemaids. Another added, a small bag in her hand. Very early this morning. The whispers spread like wildfire. The maid, the maid, the maid. And then it hit her. She spun around, rage rising like fire in her throat. No, no, she shouted, her voice breaking. This isn't happening. He wouldn't do this to me. She grabbed her bouquet and hurled it to the ground. I am the bride. Do you hear me? I am the one he chose. Guests looked on in shock. Some pulled out phones, others turned away, embarrassed. Olivia tore off her veil and screamed at the cameras. Stop filming, turn that off. But the damage was done. Her perfect image cracked, her flawless fairy tale shattered. On the biggest day of her life, Olivia Roberts was left standing alone. Not even her father came to console her. Chief Roberts had already slipped out quietly, avoiding the press like smoke. Inside the mansion, the staff watched from a distance. Some shook their heads, others just sighed. But in one quiet corner of Lagos, far from the chaos, David sat calmly in a private car, his phone turned off. He wasn't dressed in a tuxedo. He wasn't near an altar. He was on his way to somewhere quieter, somewhere real. The wedding had never been real. The love had never been true. But today, finally, he chose truth. And as the cameras zoomed in on Olivia's trembling hands, the world saw it. The wedding had everything: glamour, beauty, power, except a groom. The sky over Lagos was gray that morning, not with rain, but with that still, heavy silence that seems to settle when something important has just ended. Inside a dim hospital room, Maria sat quietly beside her mother's bed. The machines had stopped humming. The nurses had gently pulled the sheets over Mama Grace's peaceful face. There were no more whispers of, she's fighting, or just one more week. The fight was over. Maria didn't cry, not yet. She just sat there, holding her mother's frail hand, now cold and still. Her world felt empty, quiet in the worst way. A nurse entered softly. I'm sorry, Maria. She went peacefully. Maria nodded, her lips pressed tightly together. She whispered, she waited for me. I was here. And that was all that mattered. She stayed a little longer, whispering prayers through dry lips, her back aching from sleepless nights, her heart breaking, but calm. She had done everything she could. She didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway, or the low voice asking, "Which room is she in?" But when she turned around, David was standing in the doorway. He wasn't in a suit this time, just a plain shirt and jeans, no driver, no entourage, just him. Maria blinked, confused, almost dazed. "Sir?" David stepped inside slowly. "Maria." She stood, wiping her face. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you," he said gently. She shook her head. "Now isn't the time. My mother she's gone." "I know," he said quietly. "I'm so sorry." Maria looked away, suddenly feeling small. Her blouse was creased, her eyes swollen. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't even combed her hair. And now, of all times, he had come. "Sir, I can't talk right now," she said, turning back to her mother. "Please." David stepped closer but didn't push. "Maria, I heard what happened, and I just wanted to be here, not as your boss, not as a billionaire." She looked at him again, eyes sharp with pain. "Then as what?" He hesitated, then said softly, "As a man who should have seen you sooner." Maria's breath caught. David continued, his voice low but steady. "I was going to marry someone who saw love as a business deal, who looked down on people like you, and I almost walked straight into that life, blind." He stepped closer. "But you showed me something different. The way you loved your mother, the way you gave, even when you had nothing left to give. I followed you once, remember? To this very hospital. I saw you sit by her bed and pray like it was the only thing keeping her alive." Maria looked down, swallowing hard. "That's all I had." "And it was more than enough," he said. She shook her head. "Why are you saying all this?" "Because I canceled the wedding," David replied softly. "I walked away. I left Olivia at the altar." Maria gasped quietly. "What? Why?" "Because I realized something, Maria," he said. "You don't build a future with someone who only sees your money. You build it with someone who sees your heart." She stared at him, stunned. "I came to ask you something," he said. "Not as a maid, not as a servant, but as the woman who changed my life." Maria took a step back. "No, I can't. I'm not like her. I don't fit into your world." "You're right," David said. "You don't fit into that world." She looked up, confused. He smiled gently. "You rise above it." Tears finally fell from Maria's eyes. "You don't have to say anything now," David added. "I just needed you to know. I see you, and I don't want to walk through the rest of my life without you." Maria's lips trembled. "I'm scared." "I know," he whispered, reaching for her hand. "But this time, I'll be right beside you." And in that quiet hospital room, surrounded by loss, something new began. Not a fairy tale. Something real. 1 year later, the world looked very different. The newspapers that once printed headlines about David Okoro's high society wedding were now writing about something much more surprising: how the billionaire quietly married a woman no one expected. Maria. No longer dressed in a maid's uniform, she now stood confidently beside David, not in the background, not in silence, but in her own right. The shy, soft-spoken girl who once cleaned floors in silence was now a woman with a voice, a vision, and a presence that moved people to tears. She didn't chase fame. She didn't post luxury photos or flash diamond rings. Instead, she did something no one saw coming. She started a foundation. The Grace Foundation, named after her late mother, offered free dialysis, treatment, and emotional care to poor patients across Lagos. What started with one small clinic soon grew into a network of support centers. People called her the Quiet Angel. But Maria didn't care about titles. She just wanted to help people who were once like her, forgotten, struggling, but still fighting. At every event, she always said the same thing. Tina, dignity isn't about money. It's about how you treat people when you think no one is watching. And the nation listened. Meanwhile, Olivia's story faded into whispers. She tried to salvage her reputation at first. Interviews, photo shoots, even claims that she left David, not the other way around. But the truth always finds a way to surface. No one clapped for her anymore. No one invited her to speak. Her power had always depended on appearances, and those eventually run out. But Maria? She glowed without trying. Every time she walked into a hospital, patients smiled. Every time she visited a community, children rushed to hug her. Not because she was rich, but because she understood pain and never let it harden her heart. As for David, he had never looked more at peace. He still ran his empire, still attended meetings and signed million-dollar deals. But now, he came home early. Now he laughed more, smiled without faking it. He had traded the noise of high society for the calm of something much deeper. Love built on truth. And Maria gave him that every single day. On their first wedding anniversary, they didn't throw a fancy party. No camera crews. No headlines. Instead, they went somewhere quiet. Just the two of them. A simple lakeside cottage far from the city noise. The sun was setting over the water, casting golden light over everything. Birds chirped softly in the distance. The wind was calm. The world, for a moment, was still. Maria sat beside David on a wooden bench, their hands gently intertwined. She wore a long, simple dress, her hair tied back, barefoot on the grass. David looked at her, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "Do you remember the elevator?" he asked. Maria laughed quietly. "How could I forget? I thought we'd never get out." He squeezed her hand. "I think I needed to be stuck that day." "Why?" she asked. "Because it made me slow down and finally see what was right in front of me." Maria looked at him, her eyes filled with emotion. David leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't just open my heart, Maria. You healed it." She didn't reply with words. She simply rested her head on his shoulder, letting the quiet say everything. And there, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting soft gold over the lake and lighting up the edges of their silhouettes, two people who came from completely different worlds sat side by side, not as billionaire and maid, but as husband and wife, as partners, as a love story no one saw coming, but one the whole country would never forget.